Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. I am Rabbi Jenny Greenspan here for Congregation Beth-El Zedek in Indianapolis. Excited to do our weekly Torah Talk. I hope you enjoyed the pre-recorded one while I was on vacation last week to make sure that we still got to share some Torah together. And I am back in Indy this weekend, and so here I am live once again for the last time at this time. I'll say again at the end. But beginning next week, since we have been able to offer live in-person Shabbat morning services at 10 o'clock, beginning next week, I will be moving the Torah Talk time from our usual 9:30 up just a little bit earlier to 9 o'clock to allow our local congregants who want to come and enjoy our in-person services time to both participate with me here and to get here to the building in person. So beginning next week, Torah Talk will go to 9 o'clock rather than 9:30. If you aren't joining us in person and would prefer to continue watching at 9:30 because, you want to enjoy your Saturday morning lie-in, that is perfectly fine because Facebook will automatically hold on to the recording for you, but I might not be able to greet you as readily. But you will, of course, still get the opportunity to learn a little bit of Torah with me just a little bit later than live. So I'll do a reminder of that again at the end of this video, but beginning next week we will go to 9 o'clock rather than 9:30 Eastern for our weekly Torah Talk so that you can have some Torah and come enjoy hearing some Torah in person with us at our services. So firstly, Shabbat Shalom and welcome to the Siegel. Shabbat Shalom to Renee Fout, to Ellen Hamburger. Shabbat Shalom, good morning to Jody Zucker and to Phyllis Luger. Shabbat Shalom to the Sclares, to Cindy Harp, to Peter Trahonar Mayer, I hope I pronounced that correctly. And Shabbat Shalom to Jim Hammond. So good to see so many of you joining here virtually, and looking forward to seeing some of you joining me in person in a little bit of time. So Shabbat Shalom and welcome. So this morning we are moving into the fifth and final book of our Torah. So last week we concluded the book of Numbers. We spoke a bit about the idea of the adventures and where we're going to go, and needing the moment to pause and look back at where we have been. You might have expected when we moved into the next book that we should now be, well, getting to where we were going, that this Torah portion, that this book should be taken up with the subject of what it was to actually get into the land of Israel and to settle the land. Just to throw a wrench in your normal literary expectations, that is not what the book of Deuteronomy does. That is, in fact, the book of Joshua, usually considered the first book of the prophets rather than a concluding book of the Torah, though there are some scholars who will debate whether the Pentateuch should really have been a hexateuch, meaning that the book of Joshua could have been a sixth book to the Torah rather than a first book of the prophets. But that is a conversation for biblical scholars and scholars of biblical critique. But it is in fact not what the book of Deuteronomy is. The book of Deuteronomy, or in Hebrew, Sefer Devarim, is called the book of words, or Deuteronomy, the second telling. And so the book of Deuteronomy kind of takes up the charge that I expressed last week of reviewing where we have been before we take the next step forward. Though interestingly, it also seems to suggest that we shouldn't do that for too long, which we'll look at specifically in a couple of verses today. But a Shabbat Shalom and welcome also to Tori and to Marty. I'm glad you are here as well. So for all of those who would like to follow along with me in the book, you can, of course, always go to our Shabbat morning virtual resources page on the Beth-El Zedek website. Go to BEZ 613, go to the worship and scroll down to the Shabbat resources and scroll on that page down to where it says Torah Talk and Etz Chaim. You can find a PDF of the Etz Chaim Chumash there. You can grab a physical copy of your Etz Chaim Chumash if you would like, or any other copy of the Chumash or Sefaria, or any way that's the best way to look at the book of Deuteronomy with me. So as I said, the book of Deuteronomy, or the Sefer Devarim, is taken up subject of words, of retelling. One of my teachers, Rabbi Sean Fieldmeyer, said their favorite thing about this book is that it is actually Moses's speech. Rather than a sort of third-person narrator, most of this book is narrated by Moses himself. and is a review of what that he had done, what the journey for the people has been. And as my teacher, Rabbi Sean, points out, he is the person, Moses, is the person who, when we first met him in the book of Exodus, said that he was slow of tongue, that he was not good with words, that he didn't want to speak. And here he is, after a journey of leadership, a difficult journey of navigating the wilderness, of helping a people transition out of a trauma and figure out what they needed, a people who were quick to complain and quick to see the negative. Here he is Moses, on the other side of that difficult journey, now able to speak, and now able to fully express himself. So he, at the beginning of this week's Torah portion, will begin talking, and he will not stop talking until the very end of this book, until the very end of our Torah. So there's a charge there for those of us who struggle, who may not always know what to say or when to say it, to use those words and to allow our journeys to help us grow, to speak. And I want us to look at a particular verse in this week's Torah portion that kind of gives me a hint that we are expected to do that, even more than just Moses' own words, and that he does it himself. We'll start toward the beginning of the book. We're going to do a little bit of a flip through this Torah portion. We'll start at the very beginning of the portion in chapter 1, verse 1, Deuteronomy 1:1. If you are following in an Etz Chaim Chumash, it's on page 981. Ele devarim asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael be'ever hayarden bamidbar, ha'arava mul suf, ben paran uven tofel lavan, v'chatzerot v'di zahav. These are the words that Moses addressed to all of Israel on the other side of the Jordan, about to cross the water, through the wilderness, in the Arva near the Suf, between Paran and Tofel, Lavan, Chatzerot, and Di Zahav. It's 11 days from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir route. It was the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, that Moses addressed the Israelites in accordance with the instructions that God had given him for them, after he defeated Sichon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, the king of Og of Bashan, who dwelt in Ashtarot and Edrei. On the other side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound his teaching, and he said, Moses will begin speaking. Adonai, our God, spoke to us at Horeb. Horeb is another name for Sinai, when we received the covenant, saying, you have stayed long enough at this mountain. That's the phrase I want us to look at for just a moment. In the Hebrew, verse 6, Adonai Eloheinu diber aleinu bechoreb lemor, rav lachem shevet bahar hazeh. You have too much, in a somewhat broken but more literal translation. Rav lachem, too much for you. It's been too long for you. Shevet bahar hazeh. You have sat at this mountain. You have stayed in this one place for too long. You heard the commandments at Horeb, at Sinai. You heard the 10 commandments. We'll get a review of them in next week's Torah portion. And you have now been sitting here for too long. Last week's Torah portion, these are the voyages, and we went, from here to here to here to here to here to here, and now you've been sitting at this one mountain for too long. You're not getting up. You're not finding what the charge is that you need to get up and keep going. Go forward with me in the book to chapter 2, verse 3. In the Etz Chaim Chumash, that's on page 990. If you are following along in a different Chumash, just find Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 3. Where we'll see very similar Hebrew wording again. Rav lachem sov et har hazeh, pnu lachem tzafona. God said to me, you have been skirting this hill country, is what the JPS translation says, long enough. Now turn north. I would actually point out that it's not even the hill country, at Har Hazeh, this one mountain, this one hill, this one place. Now instead of sitting there, the very beginning of Deuteronomy, we said we've been sitting at the one mountain for too long. We received our instructions and we just kind of sat there. Said, okay, that'll be good when we're ready to go for it. Okay. God said, all right, get up. You've been sitting here for too long. And now we have Rav Lachem Sov et Har Hazeh. Sov or sivuv lesovev. We might hear a similar shoresh if it sounds sort of familiar. You may be familiar with the Hebrew word for dreidel is a sevivon. Sov or lesovev is to circle something. It's to go around. In the Hebrew, or in the JPS translation, we said we've been skirting. We've been going around. We've been just going in circles. When going in circles around the same mountain, the same set of instructions, knowing what should come next, knowing what we might need as our next step, and we've been going in circles and just having a circular movement. Sov lachem, or Rav lachem, sov et har hazeh. For too long, you have been encircling the same mountain, going in circles, around and around and around. And I think that happens to us a lot in life. When we either hear of a challenge and a project that we want to get started on, but we're not quite sure if we're ready to do it, we either sit, Rav Lachem Shevet Bahar Hazeh in chapter 1, or we think it through, and then we think it through again, and we think it through again, but we never quite move. We never quite get anywhere. Perhaps that can be a big journey in our lives, a change that we want to make in our lives, or a project we want to do, something we want to embark upon. And we think it through, and we do it again, and we do it again, and we stay in circles. I think often we also do this simply by who we surround ourselves with. We surround ourselves with the same people and the same opinions. We tend to go in circles. We have constant circular conversation, always affirming what we already believe and avoiding what we don't want to hear. We allow ourselves to be constantly circling the same opinion, the same place, not allowing ourselves to grow. And so here we have a charge from God, as Moses is quoting God here. It says, you have been skirting this hill country, whatever the hill it is might be for us, that we have been constantly circling and going around in the same way, always expecting it to, maybe this time will be different, or maybe one more circle will motivate me to change, will motivate me to move forward. And here we have Pnu lachem tzafona, turn yourself northward. Try a different direction. If we've been constantly going this way, go here and go that way. Constantly, if we're constantly around and around circular conversation, perhaps it is time to try something new, to find a way to turn ourselves. So this week, I invite us to challenge ourselves to find what it is that will help us to make that turn north, to not be, as the idiom suggests, the idiom I have heard attributed to Albert Einstein, though I cannot confirm that he is the true source of that. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. Perhaps that is indeed what we do often in life. We often find ourselves circling the same mountain over and over, always in the same direction. And so the challenge becomes, how do we hear the message of Pnu lachem tzafona, to change our direction, to turn and to hear? I challenge us this week as we enter a new Shabbat, into a new week. Who do we need to hear? What do we need to do? How can we allow ourselves to hear something new and to make a turn so that we can truly grow and move forward? This week we mark Tisha B'Av, beginning tomorrow, or tonight into tomorrow, the day that is often held for the moment to grieve and to mourn all that has happened to our people. And the next step after Tisha B'Av is to begin the road to the high holidays, to begin the attempt at self-reflection, the attempt to think through how and what we should be doing differently in the year ahead. And so I hope that this week, as we start to think ourselves toward that path, we find the way to find someone who can help us hear a new path, that we can trigger ourselves to turn off of the same circle and Pnu lachem tzafona, find a way to turn northward, to turn out of our circle and to expand ourselves, expand our souls, and to begin our next project anew and afresh, affirmed that we have gone through the journey and looked back on the journey that we have, and that it is again time not to sit at the mountain or to circle the same issue over and over, but to start to move forward and prepare ourselves for the high holidays and to prepare ourselves for the coming 5782, coming much more quickly than any of us may have anticipated. We'll say Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining me. Also to Alex Siegel and to everybody who has been with me this morning. We'll say Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to seeing those of you who are joining us in person in a few minutes at 10 o'clock for our service. If you are continuing to join us virtually, just go to beeasy613.org/watch live. You can watch our live stream service from the sanctuary, but I hope we get to see some of your faces here as we begin to turn away from the circle of virtual. So thank you for joining me. And again, I will start moving this particular Torah Talk program to 9 a.m. next week to help make it a little bit easier for those of you who would like to both join me here and join us in the sanctuary live. So Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to seeing you soon.